zest.
And so much to talk about. It's not this rugby union show. It's That Rugby Union Show, and welcome back.
Oh, what a difference a week makes. Look at that. The sun is shining a little bit brighter. I'm breathing a little bit easier. I didn't have to drink too much last night. There's no massive hangover to overcome. There are still things to talk about after the Springboks win over Australia in Cape Town last night. And wow, what a weekend it's been as well. And hopefully we'll have time to reflect a little bit on what the New Zealand's loss against Argentina overnight means as well for the Rugby Championship table. But well done to the Boks. They needed to bounce back. We weren't expecting it to be as wide open as what we saw in Johannesburg in week 1 of Rugby Champs. They had to grind it out, and I think the terms that we'd used last time round was revert to type default settings, factory settings, and Rassie did that. But there are a couple of areas that I think that we have some measure of concern around, and we'll talk about that, and also their chances for the Rugby Championship. I'm very happy to have Gurthro Steenkamp back on the show, joining us from France, a sunny France. They are still enjoying the end of their summer, but Sim also is with us. Gurth, it's good to see you, my bro. I want to pull Sim in here as well, because Sim, we had this chat about what we expected from the Boks this week. Overall, your thoughts?
Yeah, I must admit I'm a bit conflicted, because we all kind of said, well, we need to make sure that it's back to the old DNA, and we were given a DNA team. Granted, there was a couple of disruptions towards the back end of the build up to the match. We lost Willie Leroux and then lost Jean-Luc Dupré at number 8, and then ironically ended up with a loose trio that looked a bit like the one that was picked for Ellis Park. But that's a story, that's a story for a bit later in the chat. And the thing for me was, I think we'd identified the lineouts, the breakdown, and the game management as issues from Ellis Park. All 3 of those things were sorted out, and yet we all sitting with this weird sort of dissatisfaction. And that's probably what I'm more interested in discussing today. Are we difficult to please? Because last week we were crying for exactly the game we got yesterday, and now that we got that game and got the win, we're now poking holes in it again. I know the human condition is wired that way, but it's a bit nuts, no?
It is nuts, but so are South African rugby supporters. And yeah, we do expect too much. We have become spoiled. We expect them to win every single match. And it's almost strange when you consider that we play a rugby championship against 3 of really the best rugby teams in the world every year. But I think that probably has a little bit to do with what we can expect in those back-to-back tests against the All Blacks. I think that plays into the psyche of, oh my goodness, are we good enough? But let's not forget how good these Aussies were against the British and Irish Lions. And I think a lot of us, and I know myself, guilty of this, of thinking, maybe the Lions weren't all that great. Maybe the Lions were a bit of a watered down, not the best Lions, British and Irish Lions squad we've seen in a couple of years. But I think you have to hand Joe Schmidt. He's really turned that team around. They've got so much excitement. They also lost a lot of players due to injury, not just after the match, but before the second one as well, like the Springboks. And I want to talk about those injuries. But Gurthro, obviously there was a shock to what we saw at Ellis Park. We expected them to bounce back. If you'd asked me a week ago, Boks win by 1, I'll take it. And like Sim says, they've had a proper result. 30-22 is no mean feat against the Wallabies, especially in a wet Cape Town. But here we are thinking like, oh, we could have been better. Could have been better.
Oh, man, yeah, I think you hit it on the nail right there. I think sometimes the South African public, we are a bit spoiled with everything we've experienced over the years. But I'll tell you this, I had a few brandies while watching the game. I didn't even have a hangover this morning, so the win definitely helps. It impacts your state of mind and your recovery process while as a supporter. So I'm quite grateful for that. Yeah, Sam, what you're saying, you can be a bit conflicted, and I think maybe it's important, taking from from a player's point of view. Tough losses like that, it hurts. It hurts. Now, I said it in the week when and mentioned that, players take it tough. They do their own reviews. The coaches are working hard. Everybody's grafting. And this win was the most important. That was priority number one. Get the win. We don't care how ugly it is. When we can sit back now on our couches and overanalyze every single area of the game, and we will fire things, which is not great. Okay, but I think the most important thing is that we got that win. And also taking into account, there's a lot of changes from the team that lost at Ellis Park. There were a lot of disruptions. And also for a team to kind of find that cohesion and that synchronization amongst them, or that synergy amongst themselves, that is tough and that is hard. And on top of that, redoing the game, they've been training for months, a very attacking style of play, or as Tony Ball, you guys call it in South Africa. And now to switch back to the DNA, that's tough and that's hard. And I think, the Boks, at the end of the day, they did what they needed to do. Are there some areas to improve? Definitely. But as a supporter, very happy with that. As a coach, I'm also great to see that they kind of tried to go back to their DNA, but there were opportunities where they could have potentially varied the play a bit.
Yeah, Julian, producer Julian, being a typical Springbok fan, saying the consequences of defeat justified the way we approach the game. Always unhappy Springbok fans. We want them to win every match by 50. It's not going to happen. And given that, do drop a comment as well. All in the game, I see you there. In fact, maybe I'll go straight to that comment, because he says better O'Connor goal kicking, he says, could have resulted in back-to-back Australian wins. And yeah, he missed a couple, but let's also not forget that right at the end of that game, there was that pass which was fired off by, I think, Earburn to Jesse, which just fell short and ended up going into touch, and that would have been a 15-point victory margin potentially, because there was no one in front of him, which I think would have probably glossed over what this result needed to be. This needed to be a hard-fought, ground-out victory, so that we're under no illusions as to the strength of the other teams in the rugby champs. And I spoke about Joe Schmidt, I spoke about the Aussies. They're becoming quite an outfit. And talking about James O'Connor, Gurthro, what do you think would have happened had he played in those Lions matches? I just feel like they missed an opportunity there, because he's looked so good, so calm, and he, definitely plays like the experienced campaigner that he is. I just think that maybe they missed a trick there. He really looked good.
Look, I'm no specialist when it comes to backline play, but I've had my fair amount of games on PlayStation with Shimmy.
You tackled a lot of facts.
But definitely, I think where James O'Connor brought a lot to the Aussie team is in their unstructured play. He has just given them that stability, and we've seen the Aussies have been dangerous. When there's a turnover, or when they're winning that air battle and they're playing and it's unstructured, they are dangerous. It would have been interesting, definitely, to see what he would have brought in the Lions series, which was quite tight and was quite intense. But, end of the day, that's the experience that players bring. You also saw the effect of Handré Pollard coming in. It gives us a bit that stability and calmness in terms of the game management and going back to what we know, the aerial battle, etc. But, it's great to see players, I think he's 35, if I'm not mistaken, and he's still going. And that's brilliant. Once again, we shouldn't fall into that trend of judging players on their age. But just to come back quickly to something you mentioned earlier, our South African supporters, we're not always happy and maybe we are spoiled. But let's not forget, this is the trend of the Springboks before every single World Cup. We always go through a drip. We are on track. We need to go through a dip. Sometimes it needs to be tough for us to kind of get that pressure going, because we love to perform under pressure. And it kind of needs to be like a knife against our throat, a gun against our head, and a bazooka somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah. We do tend to thrive under pressure. That's not the kind of pressure I want for myself.
Yeah, I know. It's only a game, man. Jeez.
But, well, talking about that, because a lot of this season so far to me seems informed on the Springboks build up to 2027. We're speaking about depth, about players maybe not necessarily going to be there. Willie Leroux, we said just last week, some not going to be there probably, possibly, arguably, come 2027. And we missed him because I think Rassie had plans for him in terms of playing that Tony ball and just in terms of options and attack. But to lose a player like that at the 11th hour, and as you said, at 8th man, we had Kwagga Smith having to come in. I feel for Jean-Luc because he's always ready. He always rocks up at POC camps. He always wants to play his bit. But I think a bout of gastro saw him not selected ultimately. And Sim, you started the season, well, we did, talking about the fact that we don't seemingly have a lot of depth at 8th man. And I just wonder, isn't it time for Rassie to, I don't know, maybe call Ivan Roos? Maybe, I don't know.
This Ivan Roos thing again.
Yeah, because we're back there.
Yeah, look, it's tough. Look, I think one of the things to look at is, do we think Ivan Roos had a great season for the Stormers, or did the Stormers season sort of put paid to Ivan Roos's chances? Do you know, like sometimes by being in the wrong team, you can kind of like sort of suffer by association almost, where if you look at, say, Cameron Hanekom, he played for a Bull side that made it all the way to the final, and therefore, the light was shining a bit better on him. And then I think the third thing you've got to ask, the last anyone saw of Ivan Roos was in that quarterfinal against Glasgow. A lot of the Stormers had awful games, including, ironically enough, Sasha Feinberg and Gomezul. That was probably his worst sort of franchise game that I'd ever seen him play. And, he didn't have a great game either. This is Ivan Roos now. And so I'm caught between two things. A, is he in the kind of form that will transform what's going on at number 8 for us? I.e., is he the guy to get the job done, even if Jasper Wiese is there? That's the first question. And then the second question is he what they want in terms of how he plays? There is such a thing as, these guys have earned the right to sort of, they've earned the right to pick the kind of player profile that, they feel like suits how they want to play. Because when you're down to sort of, Kwagga, Siyakolisi, Kobus Wiese as your number 8, you do have to wonder, what's going on with your number 8 sort of depth. I'm still curious, by the way, to find out what happened with Joano Augustus, because that's another guy that we're very interested in. And when I look at him, he looks like almost like an improvement on Jasper in that he's got the same bang in the carry, but he's got a bit of hands, he's got a bit of pace, more pace than he has, and that little bit of sort of heads up rugby. But anyway, that's the story for another day. But the thing is, for me, I think the ultimate question we've now got to be asking is, if Ivan Roos is fit and healthy, is he the player for the Boks?
Yeah. Obviously there is a little bit of trepidation there from the Springbok coaching staff. I did think that when he came on against Italy in the second half, I think it was the first Italy test, he actually looked quite decent. But I was just left wondering, after we put a center on at loose forward late in that match, in a very tight match against Australia, whether we're doing the right thing here. Like, I looked at the Aussies back row, and they certainly had the more, I think, balanced back trio. And even, I absolutely don't hate Kwagga. I love him. I think he's, one of the most underrated players just in global terms. but he's not necessarily the kind of guy that the Springboks would want to start at eighth man. Gurthro, your thoughts on the loose trio? And look, Sia is going to be back. I don't know what's happening with Gurthro Steenkamp, like you say, Sim. I don't quite know how long Cam Hanekom's injury is going to still keep him out on the sidelines, but to me still seems the number one choice. And of course, the end of a 4-match ban as well, means that there should be some depth going into the tours. But your take on the loose trio and how we started. Maybe it was too late to call in a Vincent Chituka. Maybe it was too late to call in an Evan Roos, given that, the withdrawal happened on the day of, if not just slightly before the actual match.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one because, like Sam just mentioned, as coaches, they got a plan in mind. They're looking for certain players, certain profiles. Not always about performance for their franchises or their clubs or the way they are performing individually. Are they that missing puzzle that a team needs to function well? So, Evan Roos, we all know, I believe he's a great player. He's got great qualities and is a strong ball carrier. And I do believe that the coaches will take that into consideration. He's playing in a team, maybe it's not performing well. So they don't always judge it. I mean, I in the past played in the way back in the days when the Bulls wouldn't perform that well, which didn't happen a lot. It was only in 2008. And they still managed to get corrected. But all jokes aside, I think it's tough because if you look at Van Staden and with Kwagga, these guys gave it their all. They gave it their best. They're trying to be a nuisance around the rucks. They're trying to get stuck in over there. But with the loose forward situation, we do need that. We need a bit of extra pace. We need that extra oomph, someone that can be good with his feet, moving and finding that space and trying to get those offloads. And coming back to what you mentioned with Handré Pollard coming on, I think it was a good call because the reason for that, if you look at it, the Wallabies, they were dangerous on attack when they had the ball in hand. They were constantly finding space, with their tip passes, behind the back pass. They were always exploiting us in defense. And when we miss our targets on the rush defense, we expose. So in that case, the end of the game, having an extra defender with pace that can help you catch up lost causes, I think it was a really good call because considering the profile of the players that we have in Van Staden and Kwagga Smith, they're not the most like that. They get across the park, they're good off the mark, but sometimes you need those extra loose forwards that are kind of like your hybrid players, if I can put it that way, that can really help you out in tough situations.
Yeah, I agree that they found a lot of gaps, the Aussies, which made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. And maybe the intensity with the turn and chase, I wasn't very happy with. I'm not going to single out Kane Moody as being the only one, but I remember in that first Aussie try, I sort of looked and thought, you're not really tracking back as hard as you should be, young man. And Sim was a little bit concerned with how easily they found space with the little chips and so on, just behind that Springbok defense. I just thought we need to shore that up. And at the same time, want to say well done to Apele Lefase because you certainly could take a knock in confidence knowing that you've played, you've had an opportunity, but they're going to call in the old guy to come and take your position because we need a little bit more. So I thought she was quite solid, but I am worried about the number of gaps that they were able to find. Is that a Springbok thing, or do you think maybe there's something to be said about the pace at which rugby, Super Rugby is played, that allows them to play that type of game, and we're not necessarily all that attuned to it. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong, with URC, but there is a difference in pace.
Yeah, from now on you can keep digging, bro. You started it. you basically said the Oaks at Super Rugby are faster. So you're already in trouble.
But yes, that young Aussie winger was damn quick.
It doesn't matter what you do. You've got big problems now because people are going to start coming to fetch you to say, what do you mean? Because remember, just a couple of years ago, every Super Rugby guy was complaining that, oh my goodness, the Boks leaving or the South African franchises leaving was the worst possible thing that could have happened to them. And here you are, saying, well, wait, they're quicker.
No, I was just saying style of play, game plan, style of play, the pace of the game that they employ over, the full 80.
No, I think it's a bit of both. The Aussies are an incredibly smart team. I think because we've watched them kind of like, towards the end of the British and Irish Lions series, and obviously these 2 games against the Boks, because we've watched them be so physical in how they play, we're almost thinking of the Aussies as if they've kind of like completely changed how they play to confrontational and physical, because, they didn't get bullied in the scrums. Actually, over the 2 matches, I think they had the better of the lineouts. So they set pieces is rock solid. And you saw yesterday a guy like Len Ikitau taking it to the forwards in the carry. That was insane to watch. So they've got this edge now to them, because obviously, like all good rugby teams, they don't want to go out wide too soon. They want to earn the right and whatnot, whatever cliche you want to attach to that. But one thing they haven't lost is the ability to play smart heads-up rugby. So if your line, if your defensive line has advanced too far forward, especially when they're taking the ball flat, of course they're going to catch you flat-footed. The ball will always beat the man, especially if you're on the wrong side of it. So I think it's a bit of both. There is, I think Joe Schmidt yesterday in his press conference said the fact that we conceded something like half a dozen line breaks yesterday. I don't know how many we conceded the weekend before. I imagine it's in that region, or possibly even more, given the final scoreline. So his thing was, if there is a worry for the Boks going to New Zealand, it has to be the line breaks that we're conceding. But maybe the best way to answer that your question is to ask another one of Gurthro and say, Gurthro, you've obviously watched the Boks, especially under Rassie and them as a coach. And what for you has changed in the Bok defense from, let's say 2019, because that's when the defense bedded in properly under Jacques Nienaber. From then to now, what for you is the sort of the slight change? And could we blame that for the line breaks, or are there more factors at play?
No, it's okay. Look, it's a tough one. I think they're trying to carry on the philosophies of Jacques Nienaber with the rush defense. We can clearly see that. The downside of the rush defense is that if you are missing your targets, you're exposed, and then you need players to catch up really quickly. And we need to keep in mind, when you have different combinations playing, you got a new 10, you see Damien and Jesse playing together again, you got different wingers playing, or it shuffles around everything. I remember back in the day with Brian Abana, was probably one of the best wings in world rugby, not just because of his attacking skills and blistering speed, but because of his ability to read the attack and give information to his other teammates. And that's where a guy like Willie Leroux would have been instrumental in the defense, helping and guiding, because you got to keep in mind, some players haven't been playing well, so they need to pitch up, they need to show up. They got that pressure, not just the pressure from the team, but the stuff that you experience in the public, the media, the supporters, everything. It plays a massive role. And also the curse has been moved. Like in French, on a bougé le curseur. That means the standards have gone higher now. We expect more. We don't just expect the Boks to win. We expect excellence. But you need to keep in mind the key guys, Joe Smith. Recently, we spoke on the podcast with Andrew Trimble that played for Ireland, that was under Joe Smith. And he said the guy was relentless. He was relentless with the players, their running lines, their timing, their precision, use ability with the touch of the ball, the dexterity of their hands, those soft passes, the behind the back pass. He always believed he always needs to be 4 options when there's the forwards running hard. And even if it's behind the back, it needs to still look like you're getting the ball. So instead of focusing on saying, okay, we're worried about the South African defense, you need to actually acknowledge the quality of the attack of the Australian rugby team, because those little soft passes, those slight offloads, and it's like the defense was there, the pressure was there. And that is not something which just happens overnight. One, like you actually train for that. So coming back to the question of Simi as a coach, you know that if you manage to get those passes away under pressure and you work on the individual skill set of a player, then you will find space. So the goal will be to find space because it is outside. So that's why it comes down to connection, communication, and also most importantly, the experience of the playing, having that tactical awareness, trying to anticipate a bit what the attacking team is going to do.
Well, I think keeping on this thread, all in the game, thanks for that comment. Most Argentine players no longer play in Super Rugby and have had no issues beating New Zealand, South Africa, and Oz over the past couple of years. So, yeah, I guess. Is it? Am I the guy? Let me lead into it because I'm already up shit creek without a paddle, clearly. And I'll be the critical guy and say, the other concern, area of concern or position, Girth, that I'm starting to think about more and more as the Springboks start talking more and more about leading up or building up to 2027 is hooker. Malcolm went off and there were talks that perhaps there was a bit of a niggle. Do feel we're a little bit thin at the moment at hooker. And look, at prop, I am a little bit more forgiving because I've seen the injuries, and I think a couple of those guys will come back into the fold. That said, I thought Ox had an amazing game, and I didn't expect him to change his ways, but very good to see him be a little bit more vocal, sort of step into that leadership role a little bit more. Loved seeing that. Just so that I'm not completely the evil guy.
I'm going nowhere near that question. Not when we have a front row in our midst.
No, honestly, I was impressed with Oxy, his work rate, and also he's starting to show unbelievable skills, picking up balls at the bottom of his feet and getting the passes away. He is getting across the park quite a lot, and his work rate has picked up massively. I think we're starting to see him transforming to a different player, a better player, starting to level up in a sense because he's starting more, he's getting more game time. I think he played about almost 70 minutes yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. So coming back to Ox, that is brilliant because it sees the amount of confidence he has. And great players, even though you're not a vocal leader, when you realize someone needs to step up and someone needs to kind of like get the troops together, you do it. That happened to me at the Bulls. That started in 2009 when we lost players like Gary Botha, when guys like Victor weren't there. Like all of a sudden, those vocal leaders weren't there. And because he's performing at the moment and because he's someone you can count on, he has that credibility to actually voice his opinion and players will listen. And I think it's so much more powerful because he's not a guy that will constantly talk. So when he's talking, the guys are like, okay, we need to better listen. So it's great to see new leadership kind of taking, because that's what we're going to need going forward into the World Cup in 2027. We're going to need our younger players to step up, to become those experienced players that we can rely on. And we also mustn't be too harsh on the older players. Yes, I agree. You can't go with the core group of seasoned players over the age of 30, that stuff. You need that with the intensity of the game, the way the game is going. And as we've seen on defense, that's the key. With the unstructured play, with the counter-attacking abilities of the individual players, especially if you look at the All Blacks as well, you need players that can be quick on their feet and get back into the game as quickly as possible. We have seen the benefit of having a guys like Dwayne Vermeulen. We have seen the benefit in the past in 2019, Sculpt Brits, even though he didn't play a lot, just being there in that group. So those senior players will still have a pivotal role to play. And I think that's also one of the reasons why Russ is constantly changing his team. He's trying to see what players can do. And you mentioned it there with Fassi. He didn't have his greatest game last week. And he knew he wasn't going to start this game, but he pitched up. He gave it his best. And I think where I can really compliment the Bok players, they really tried. There might have been a lack of precision. Maybe sometimes our ball handling skills let us down, but we can't fault them for not really trying and really making that effort to get stuck into the Wallabies.
Yeah, and let it not be forgotten that they did win the game. Just talking about what you just mentioned now, Anthony Vomberg, I'm not quite sure. I think really touching on what you've just said there, Gurthro, saying there are always difficult periods in times of transition, blooding in the younger players, finding balance. And he speaks about the junior Springboks that were called into the squad. And I think that is part of it. The concern, though, Sim, is that correct balance, is you want to give everybody the opportunity. And look, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. How many players did Rassie have at the start of the season? Was it like 52? Or?
No, it was 46.
Was it 46? He's going to choose 36 now for this tour. Yeah. Had he not had that depth right up front, we would have been feeling it, just given the impact, I think, of injuries as well. So yes, he wants to rotate quite a lot. There is something to be said for having a settled Springbok core squad. You know, the match day 23 that knows is going to be out there. You know who the bomb squad members are. But he does need to build that depth. But it's just finding that balance. And I am relieved that there are options in this season that we didn't have at the end of last season, despite, the achievements of last season.
Yeah, look, I think the best place to start answering this question is to go, what do Rassie and them, what did they always say their mandate was in 2018 when they started? They always said it was to win, to transform, and to build depth. So that's always the three balls they're juggling at any given time when they make a selection of, whatever player for whatever tournament. So that's the first part. And what they've done is that win part, we all take it for granted that, they'll always win. But when you do try new players, you might lose games. And I think last weekend showed us exactly how quickly the tide can turn against you. And even this weekend at some level, how quickly the tide can turn against you when you lose. So it's not like you can say, you know what, we've got 2 back-to-back World Cups in the bank, a British and Irish Lions series, 2 rugby championship. Granted, the other one was a bit short because it was in World Cup year. We get it. But, you can't say I've got all these things in the bank that, by way of things we won. Therefore, we can afford to lose a few games along the line. What really happens is you lose one game, suddenly the tide is turned against you. So that's the first thing you need to always be mindful of. And then obviously building that depth. We've said it before, 15 of the guys that are back-to-back world champions, will be 35 or over in 2027. That basically, you probably need to cut almost as many as half from that group to try and sort of, get the legs that you need to win it all over again, as opposed to try and defend it again like all the other teams that have tried to defend it with older players, have failed. And so that's where kind of like the issues are coming in with the Boks. That's why Rassie's constantly trying to make sure that he's almost sort of force feeding someone new caps to make sure that person is capable by 2027. But this is also against the background of trying to win at the same time. And then the other issue that nobody talks about enough is the guys you're trying to replace. Most of them are generational talents. We trying to replace tight head at the moment. That tight head was Frans Malherbe. I'm not saying he's retired or anything, but I'm saying you're trying to replace Frans Malherbe. For argument's sake, this is probably going to make me unpopular. You're trying to replace Bongi Mbonambi. You trying, it's soon, at some stage, you're going to have to try and replace Eben Etzebeth, Peter Steph du Toit. These are all generational guys. Actually, the greatest example is Handré Pollard. We keep thinking deep in our subconscious that, okay, we can move on with the new flags now. And then the new flags show us that, oh, sorry, not quite ready yet.
Don't do it.
You got to go back to Handré. And what does Handré do? 6 out of 6, and he runs a game like he did yesterday. And so I think that's kind of like all the things you've got to take into account. And it's a lot to juggle, and it's a lot to get it right while you're winning at the same time as well.
Yeah, no, we forget just how good this generation has been over the course of 2 World Cups. And these are very big names to try and replace or find a like-for-like replacement in. Thanks very much for those comments. Love seeing them. Roberto saying such brilliant knowledge of back play. Fantastic.
The timing
But given what Sim says about Pollard, I mean, the man does. He doesn't. I don't think he always shows us his best rugby. I think he plays his best rugby when he's in a green jersey. It's just one of those things. It's like a mental switch, and he genuinely does eat pressure for breakfast. I mean, he thrives. He thrives in it.
Now, I think you touch base on something which is very important there. I think we need to ask. We can talk about the weekly performance of the Boks while following the rugby championship, but the ultimate goal is to win the World Cup. So, right now, from a coaching point of view, you're asking yourself, who do I need in my squad to win that World Cup? And then it comes down to the basic fundamentals. Set piece is key. Do I have the right front row to dominate so we can constantly create that forward momentum and really drain or break down teams physically and mentally? Because that's what the Boks do with their set piece. Do I have the right players for the maul? Do I actually have a line-out caller when I don't have my experience? Because a lot of people forget the importance of a line-out caller. You need someone that has the strategical and tactical awareness to make the right calls, be able to read the defense. And also the same on D. We saw the important role which Will Skelton played in defense for the Mauls. So those are the key things you got to ask yourself. Then, in terms of the game plan, and I think this is what Russ is trying to do, either they're just trying to decide which game plan to play, or will they have a hybrid of both and kind of alternate and switch in between it and see and develop something new, something different, which can lead into the World Cup? Because you have 2 years to prepare for that. And you got to start bringing those players in. And if you look at Handré, I think he's only 31 now. So he's been around for so long. He's not that old. So when it comes down to your older players, another important question, not a question is, or topic of discussion is, how do you manage those players that are slightly older? How can we make sure that they will be at their optimum performance level when World Cup? So that means you need to reverse engineer it. You need to backtrack a little bit so they eventually get back to where we are right now. So that's the most important thing. And also, don't forget this. You only gain confidence through repetition, by playing, by experiencing those tough situations. And because the players today, they're surrounded by so many great experts and specialized coaches, they have the tools to become better players and eventually let up. And the key is going to come now. Who are we going to be investing our time in? Who are we going to be investing our caps in at the moment for those players? So that's going to be the big thing going forward in those key positions, to really start molding these players and accepting, you know what, they're not going to be that great in the beginning, or they might not be having their best performances. We don't want certain players to reach their peak right now. We want them to start developing the skills which is required to win a World Cup. So you need players to be mentally strong, physically strong, and skill acquisition is going to be a massive thing. We need players to be better equipped.
Yeah, I love how the comments are reflecting exactly this. Roberto saying Brannas was epic in the World Cup, talking about Dion Fourie, that senior sort of statesman coming in and serving a very, very important role. And on the opposite end of the scale, all in the game, talking about Pede, the junior Springboks, Hashim Pede, the number 9. But look, so much talent there. We don't even mention Riley Norton, the lock, who's got an incredible story. Vuso Moyos, the fly half at the Sharks. Chesville Uester. These guys really, really, really are looking like the future. And I can't wait to see them go against, grown adults, rugby players and URC. Hopefully they'll make those squads and not just sort of stick around in Currie Cup, and that they can take that step up. I can't believe how fast the time has gone. I'm almost going to have to call it, but I love this last comment from Anthony Fomberg saying, Anyone think Rassie's Boks are just doing what's required? Rassie's playing his cards close to his chest. 2 wins in New Zealand are the ultimate goal for this year. And look, he did speak about it in the press conference, Rassie, that he's still got an opportunity. We still have an opportunity to beat the New Zealanders in New Zealand. And given what we saw with Argentina versus New Zealand, I think we're on 4 points, level with Argentina. So we joined bottom of the table. But, Australia are on, 6 points?
No.
They flow.
New Zealand's on 6 points.
New Zealand's on 6, Australia's on 5.
They took a penalty to get that one losing bonus point. And then I'm still irritated by the way bonus points work in rugby championship, by the way.
Yeah.
That whole you've got to score 3 more tries thing is just insane. It makes absolutely no sense. Actually, I would have left Super Rugby just for that. It's just like when you start making it, listen, I write about drop kicks for a living. That's because I'm not a very educated man. Now when I suddenly have to make all these calculations when I'm watching a game, it just makes absolutely no sense. But anyway, sorry, to get back on point.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. But seeing somebody having to kick a 3-pointer, not to win the game at the end of the match, to me it's a bit of a damn squib. You want to get to go out and score a point in order to take the bonus point away. I'm with you.
I don't mind kicking 3 points because then you kind of like sitting at a space where you're being pragmatic. We're all like men of a certain age where we've learned to make a deal with I don't know how many devils. And so, you compromise in life, just to walk out there saying, you know what, I want something out of confrontation. I get that. What I don't get is the having to score 3 more tries than your opponent to be able to get a bonus point. That's insane. It's encouraging all the wrong things about the game. It's like this new line-out law where, if they don't contest, you can throw skew. The Aussies are actually exploiting that quite heavily at the moment because what they do is they make sure that they time that little throw just a little before, the other line-out is properly formed. And then what happens next is, guess what? You've thrown skew. Why would you allow a contest to go, that far in favor of one team? Granted, somebody's going to start asking me about mauls and, that also being a one-sided contest. So maybe I should quit while I'm still ahead. So look, I like where the tournament is. I thought actually in a strange way, now that I've sobered up from the emotion of, oh, geez, that could have been so much better last night. I think that game against Australia, if we went into the rugby championship underdone, I think yesterday's game against Australia was probably the best thing that could have happened to us. Just a proper grind, almost to realign us with what it is that we do and we do best. And that is very good for New Zealand because I'm sure Gurthro will tell you this from the days he played under Heineke Meyer. Heineke always says you never, ever, ever try to take New Zealand at their own game. You play your own game, and we were forced to play our game yesterday by conditions, the situation in the table, and whatever else you want to do. But what has since happened is we've played exactly the kind of game we needed to have in the bag if there's going to be any kind of dent made into the rugby championship defense, in 2 weeks' time when we play against the All Blacks. But what I wanted to ask though is, Gurthro, you alluded to a Bok dip, sort of like that 1 year that's always a given. ahead. Do you think this is what it is, or is it a simpler case? I'm now looking at the table of the Rugby Championship, or is it more simply a case of just how competitive this competition is this year?
Yeah, look, when I say it's kind of like a trend, if you look at the history in the past, we always had these little dips. It's like almost like, because we are fighters, South Africans, you know.
I was there in 2006.
So we kind of need to go through this process. But I think from my point of view, is the competition stuff, when people must not forget, and we said this when I was at La Rochelle, when we were back-to-back European champions, teams come for you. Teams really come. They prepare weeks, if not in months in advance for you. So playing the Springboks, if they beat the Boks, right? Because let's be honest, everybody's talking about it and said it the last few months. The Boks is the new standard. And with that comes a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility. So now teams, all they want to do is beat the Boks. You saw how the Wallabies reacted when they beat us. If you are used to beating top-class teams, you won't react like that. You understand? Which is not the case for the Wallabies, and that's why it was so important for them. And that's why we're jumping around and going crazy, and that's normal, and they deserve that win. But what I would do is we need to rather reframe this last two games. Yes, the Rugby Championships is a competitive tournament. But most importantly, what are the lessons that we've learned from the first game? If we overplay, if we don't choose the right moments to attack space and sometimes learn to adapt and just kind of take less risk, just find if we get back our confidence, that could work. What's the lessons from the second game that we got? Okay, we go back to our DNA, we go back to the kicking game, the aerial battle. But that does not mean we don't have to play. There were opportunities where we could have actually played, have those extra tip passes, have those extra passes behind the back because there was space. But then to be stuck to what we knew going direct, that was potentially the game plan. So that's the lesson that we've learned from them. And then there's a third lesson which is very important. Teams are going to come to us to match us physically. If you look at the Wallabies going for us at the mall, They actually got good go forward. They were confident in us. Teams are stopping at this mall. Teams are trying to meet us. And we even saw at times on D, we lost some of the collisions because teams are running on us. So for me, I definitely agree with it because these last two games were definitely beneficial for us because it will allow us to be battle ready for the games line. Because I didn't watch the whole game. I fell asleep at the end of the first half, the All Blacks Argentina, not because the game was boring me. I think it was more due to the effect of the ice that was in my brandy, and eventually I paid its price and I needed to catch a bit of but it was quite some exciting stuff lying ahead and seeing the result, All Blacks losing against Argentina, but the glimpses that I saw, players like Mario Chocobares, the ability to attack, the outside backs of Argentina, they're always finding space. So South Africa's D is going to have to be points, and that's why I think there's going to be so many learnings for our Springbok team regarding defense, connection, staying aligned, getting our line set. It's going to be lots of areas for us to work. Who's going to help us to improve our preparation and be a better team forward.
X, I think you're muted.
Oh, this is my age, guys. It's my age. I want to cough in silence.
You're getting old.
I'm getting old. I'm already old. Why are you getting old? But I can't believe how fast the time has gone. In fact, I can because I'm talking to two incredible gents, and I could keep you guys here for another hour. I do see one or two suggestions here on the chat. So if you want us to delve into any specific topics, drop a comment, and we certainly will do so. Coach G, what have you been up to before I let you go? And when next can we catch Lessons from the Game podcast?
Oh man, I've just been using this time to just reconnect with the family. After 4 years at La Rochelle, which was intense, and especially last season, which was mentally and emotionally draining. So just, having my family away from me being in La Rochelle, then Toulouse, I've been just focusing on family time, but also getting ready for the next opportunity, putting a lot of things into place, focusing on leveling up as a coach, preparing myself to be a forwards coach, and who knows, maybe a manager one day. So that's the main thing. I don't want to be known just as a scrum coach. That's not who I am. That was just a place to start at and get my foot in the door. And but yeah, lessons from the game's going well. Next lesson will be out next week on Tuesday. Actually, we're having my good friend and agent on it, Damien Dusso. But it's been amazing. We had corner and Big Damien. Yeah, you guys will know. He was a former journalist. Obviously, you guys know. You guys are like the mafia. But yeah, it's been going well. Been really enjoying the podcasting. Been enjoying this type of space as well. Just connecting with people and sharing our opinions. And this is what I love about this show as well. What you guys are trying to create here, the input you guys give is valuable. It's not a pundit style show. It's not a typical show. It's really high intellectual conversations, right? That keeping in mind when Sim is not too tired. But I'm sure he used his notebook for this episode as well.
All in the game. I see you there. Should do a quick pod on which junior Boks to call up over the next year or so. I love that. We'll definitely delve more and more into the juniors as the season unfolds. It's going to be weird not having a Springbok test match this coming week, but an opportunity to delve into other subjects as well. So keep those comments coming. We really are grateful for you. Share if you like this kind of conversation. Subscribe. Check out Lessons from the Game podcast as well if you haven't. Gurthro's always got some phenomenal guests on there, and people he's played against and with, and people he's worked with. It really is pretty cool to listen to. Gurth, we're grateful for you, my friend, and we'll be chatting to you again very, very soon. Thanks so much. Bonjour and merci beaucoup.
Hey guys, if you like what you see and you want to support the show, you want to be part of That Rugby Union Show family, then just hit the like button, subscribe to the show, tell your friends, make sure join us every time we're on. Slap that bell harder than notifying people in World Rugby's rule. And new episodes. Welcome back to That Rugby Union Show. Well, what a week it's been.
He's playing like a man possessed.
And so much to talk about. It's not this Rugby Union Show. It's That Rugby Union Show.